My name is Iris Calloway. I'm 29 years old. And the night my cousin posted a celebration reel about a cabin she had just sold at auction was the night I understood that the people who assume you are absent are always eventually surprised to find out where you actually are. She had used a filter that warmed the light. She was holding a champagne flute. The cabin keys were hanging from a hook on the wall behind her, the same hook my grandfather had put there in 1987, and which had held his fishing gear and his truck keys and, for the last 3 years, nothing at all. Finally done, she had written over the video, with a small confetti animation in the corner. I watched it twice. Then I set my phone down on the desk in the research station dormitory where I had been living for the past 11 months, in a building on the outer edge of a Norwegian archipelago where the sun had not fully set in 6 weeks, and I sat with my hands in my lap for a moment. I did not call anyone. I did not post response. I opened my email, found the document I had scanned and uploaded to my cloud storage in the spring of 2016, and I forwarded it to the county recorder's office in the county where the cabin stood, with the auction house copied. The subject line was 4 words and a parcel number. Ownership dispute, parcel 114. What my cousin did not know, what none of my family had apparently thought to verify in all the months they had spent arranging the auction, was that my grandfather had transferred the deed to that cabin into my name 10 years earlier, in the spring of 2015, at the same county recorder's office they had not checked before listing the property for sale. The buyer's attorney called my research supervisor's landline within the hour because my cell reception was unreliable and I had included the station's contact number in my email signature. My supervisor, a Finnish glaciologist named Dr. Eva Mäkinen, knocked on my door at 10:47 in the evening to tell me there was a call for me. I thanked her and took the call standing in the hallway with the midnight sun coming through the window at the end of the corridor. By Friday, the sale had been unwound. By Saturday, my cousin had deleted the reel. I know this because my younger brother texted me a screenshot of the empty post with a single question mark. I sent him a thumbs up and went back to work. There are things I need to explain before any of the rest of this makes sense, beginning with why I was in Norway and ending with why my grandfather put my name on a deed 10 years before any of this happened. Neither of those things is simple, but neither is complicated in the way people sometimes assume when they hear the outline. They are both just the shape of a life, accumulated. I am a field researcher in glacial hydrology. I had been accepted to a doctoral program at a university in the Pacific Northwest at 22, deferred for a year to work on a monitoring project in Iceland, completed the doctorate at 27, and moved almost immediately into a postdoctoral fellowship that had sent me, in a sequence of postings, to Greenland for 4 months, to the Canadian subarctic for 7 months, and then to the Norwegian archipelago where I had been stationed for the past 11 months, with 6 more to go, before my posting ended, and I returned to a campus position in the fall. I had not been home meaning the mid-Atlantic state where my family lived and where I had grown up, in almost 2 years. This was not unusual in my field. It was the known condition of the work, and I had known it when I chose the work. My family had mostly made peace with it in the way families make peace with things they cannot change, not fully, not without periodic expressions of what my mother called concern, and what I recognized as a combination of genuine worry and a more ambient resentment at my distance, which had become in their minds both literal and figurative. I was the only person in my extended family who had left in the way I had left. Not left for a city or a different coast, which would have been legible. My cousin Paige had done that, moving to a larger city 2 states away in her mid-20s, and nobody treated her absence as an ongoing choice that required justification. But I had left for field work, for remote postings, for the kind of work that requires you to be unreachable for stretches of time and present in places that are not on anyone's map of normal life. And this had produced, over the years, a particular quality of family attitude toward me that I can only describe as a combination of pride and erasure. They were proud of me in the way people are proud of something they don't entirely understand. And they had slowly, in my absence, stopped accounting for me in the practical decisions of family life. I noticed this in small ways over several years before I noticed it in any consequential way. I was not on the group chat where holiday plans were made. My cousin Paige's children's milestones arrived in my inbox via my mother's forwarded emails rather than direct messages. When my grandmother died, this was 4 years before the auction, 3 years before my first Arctic posting, I learned about it via a call from my mother 6 hours after the fact, and I was not reached in time to attend the service because no one had thought to try the research station's emergency contact protocol, which would have reached me in under 20 minutes. I don't say any of this to generate sympathy for a situation I had chosen. I chose it. The costs of choosing it were mine to manage. But I say it because the pattern of my family's accommodation to my absence is the reason that what happened with the cabin was possible. They had spent enough years not accounting for me that not accounting for me in a legal document had felt, I think, like simply the next instance of a long-standing arrangement. My grandfather's name was Walter Calloway. He had built the cabin on the lake in the summer of 1971 with his brother and a man named Pete Sheridan who had done most of the framing and who my grandfather paid in labor on Pete's own house the following summer. It was a two-room structure on a 3-acre parcel at the northern end of a lake in the western part of the state, accessible by a dirt road that was passable most of the year and unreliable in the worst of mud season. It had no cell service worth speaking of. The nearest town was 11 miles away. The lake was cold even in August. My grandfather had taken me there every summer from the time I was 4 until the summer I was 18 when I left for college. We drove up on Friday afternoons, the two of us, with a cooler in the back of his truck and a tackle box he had owned since before my mother was born. We fished in the mornings. We sat on the dock in the evenings. He taught me the names of what I was seeing, the birds, the rock formations along the far shore, the way the water changed color in different light at different times of day. He did not know he was teaching me to be a field scientist. He thought he was teaching me to pay attention. He was right. My cousins came to the cabin occasionally with their parents in the summer months. Paige had been there a handful of times. My Uncle Brett had a key and used the cabin for deer season most years until his knees made the walk to the blind too difficult. But the sustained relationship with the place, the year-in, year-out presence, had been mine and my grandfather's, and I think we both understood that without ever needing to say it. When my grandfather was 73, he had a conversation with an estate attorney named Robert Fenn at a small practice in the county seat, a conversation I did not know about until after its outcomes were already in place. My grandfather had decided, in the way he decided things, without consulting anyone and without making an announcement, that he wanted the cabin to go to me. Not as part of a will, which he understood could be contested or complicated, but as a direct transfer, immediate and recorded, while he was still living and unambiguously competent. He called me to tell me what he had done. I was in the middle of my second year of graduate school. He said he had transferred the deed on the cabin to my name as of that week, and that the county recorder's office had it, and that he wanted me to know in case it was ever relevant. He said he had kept a copy in the same fire safe where he kept everything important, and that when the time came I would know where to look. I thanked him. I asked if he wanted me to come up and talk about it. He said there was nothing to talk about. He said it was just a thing that was true now. I asked if he had told anyone else. He said it wasn't anyone else's business. I kept a digital scan of the deed in my cloud storage from the first week after he filed it, as a practical measure because I had learned in my first year of field work that important documents needed to exist somewhere you could reach regardless of where you were standing. My grandfather died at 79, in the winter before my first Arctic posting. He went the way he had done most things, without drama and on his own terms, in the house he had lived in for 41 years, with my grandmother beside him. I flew home. I attended the service. I spent 4 days with my family, and then I got on a plane. The fire safe went to my Uncle Brett, who was the named executor of my grandfather's estate. Among the documents in it was a copy of the 2015 deed transfer. My Uncle Brett either found it and said nothing or did not find it or found it and did not understand what it meant. I do not know which. I have never asked. The estate process after my grandfather's death took approximately 14 months. I was peripheral to it. I received updates from my mother, signed what I was asked to sign, and attended one video call with the estate attorney, a woman named Claire Nguyen who had taken over the practice from Robert Fenn after his retirement and who was methodical and clear in a way I appreciated. The cabin was not addressed in the will. This was correct. It was not in the estate because my grandfather had transferred it to me 9 years earlier. Claire Nguyen's office had confirmed this in the title review she conducted as a standard part of the estate process. What I did not know, what I found out much later in pieces, was that my Uncle Brett had a different understanding of what Claire Nguyen had told him. My Uncle Brett had understood her to say that the cabin was outside the estate, which was accurate. What he had not understood, or had chosen not to retain, was why it was outside the estate. He had formed the impression, and I believe he formed it genuinely, without intent to deceive, that the cabin was simply in an unresolved status, outside the will, but not clearly owned by anyone, and that the family would need to determine what to do with it at some point. At some point arrived approximately 2 years after my grandfather's death, when my Uncle Brett mentioned to Paige that the cabin was sitting empty and he didn't know what to do with it, and Paige, who had recently completed a real estate licensing course in the city where she lived and who had a practical orientation toward the disposition of assets, suggested that the simplest solution would be to sell it. My Uncle Brett said he thought that sounded reasonable. No one called Claire Nguyen to confirm the legal position. No one called the county recorder's office. No one called me. They hired an auction service, a regional company called Lakeshore Auction Associates, run by a man named Dan Pruitt, and listed the cabin for a 4-week online and in-person auction that concluded on a Thursday in late June, during my 11th month in Norway, during which I was in the middle of a series of instrument calibrations that had consumed most of my attention for the previous 10 days. Paige posted the reel on the Thursday evening after the auction closed. I saw it at approximately 10:15 local time, which was late afternoon back home. The email I sent to the county recorder's office was 4 sentences. I identified myself, identified the property by parcel number, stated that the deed to the property had been recorded in my name since April 2015, and attached the scanned copy of the deed that had been sitting in my cloud storage for 10 years. I copied the email to Dan Pruitt at Lakeshore Auction Associates and to the auction service's general legal contact address, which was listed on their website. I sent it, and then I sat in the dormitory kitchen and made a cup of tea and drank it while the Norwegian summer light sat on the water outside the window, which it would do for another several weeks regardless of what time the clock said. The response was not immediate. It was the middle of the afternoon on the East Coast, and the recorder's office took approximately 40 minutes to pull the file and confirm what I had sent. When they did, they contacted Lakeshore Auction Associates directly. Dan Pruitt's office contacted the buyer's attorney. The buyer's attorney called the research station. Dr. Eva Mackinnon came to find me while I was calibrating a sensor array on the north side of the station. She handed me a slip of paper with a name and a callback number. She said an attorney in the United States had called asking to speak with me and had left the impression that it was time-sensitive. She said this without any particular expression, in the way of someone who has spent 20 years in remote research environments and has seen most things. I called the number from the station's satellite phone. The attorney's name was James Whitfield, and he represented the buyers, a couple who had submitted the winning bid at the auction and who had, he said, no awareness that the ownership status of the property was in question. He was calling to understand the situation and to determine what the path forward was. I told him the situation clearly. I said the deed had been recorded in my name since 2015 and that I had documentation of this, which I had already forwarded to the county recorder's office. I said I had no objection to a sale of the property, in principle, but that any sale would need to proceed with me as the seller of record, not my uncle or Lakeshore Auction Associates. James Whitfield said he understood. He said he would advise his clients to pause and would be in contact with the auction company. The sale was formally unwound the following day. Lakeshore Auction Associates sent the buyer's deposit back within 48 hours. Dan Pruitt's office sent an email to my Uncle Brett that I was copied on. Someone in the chain had added me, which stated plainly that the title review had returned a valid recorded deed in my name and that the auction company had proceeded in error and would be issuing a full refund. I read the email twice. Then I filed it in a folder and went back to work. I did not call my Uncle Brett. I did not call Paige. I let the email do what it had done. My Uncle Brett called me 4 days later. It was a Sunday, late morning his time, and I was between outdoor sessions, sitting in the dormitory with a notebook open in front of me. He said he needed to understand what had happened. I told him. I told him about the 2015 deed transfer, about my grandfather's conversation with Robert Fenn, about the recording at the county recorder's office. I told him that Claire Nguyen's estate review had confirmed the cabin was outside the estate, and I told him, as carefully as I could, that the reason it was outside the estate was because it had been in my name for 9 years before my grandfather died. My Uncle Brett was quiet for a moment. Then he said he hadn't known. I said I believed him. He said nobody had told him. I said I knew. I said my grandfather had made the transfer and had told me about it and had chosen not to make a broader announcement, and that I had respected that as his decision to make, and that I had not raised it in the estate process because Claire Nguyen's review had addressed it and I had understood it to be resolved. He said, "But you knew the whole time." I said yes. Another silence. I heard him shift in whatever chair he was sitting in. He said, "What are you going to do with it?" I said I wasn't sure yet. I said I had 6 more months in Norway, and I wasn't in a position to make decisions about property from 11 time zones away. I said I would come home when my posting ended, and I would look at the cabin and figure out what made sense. He said okay. I said I'd be in touch when I was back. He said to be safe. I said I would. I ended the call and looked at the notebook open in front of me, which had 3 weeks of instrument readings on it in my own handwriting, and I picked up my pencil and went back to what I had been doing. Paige called the following Thursday. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was about 4 minutes long and covered, in sequence, her genuine belief that the cabin was unowned, her position that she had been trying to help the family by managing the sale process, her description of the considerable amount of time she had invested in the listing and the coordination with Lakeshore Auction Associates, and a closing section, delivered in a slightly different tone than the rest, in which she said she thought it would have been nice if I had said something sooner if I had known, which she said she understood I had. I listened to the message twice. I did not call back that week. I thought about what I wanted to say and waited until I had decided. I called her back on a Sunday, 10 days after her message. I said I understood why she felt the way she felt. I said I wanted to address the things she had said at the end about whether I should have said something sooner. I said that the deed had been addressed in the estate process and that I had assumed that information had been shared with the family and that I recognized now it had not been, and that I was sorry for the confusion that had created. I did not say I was sorry for the outcome, because I was not, and I had decided not to say things I did not mean. Paige said she appreciated the call. Her voice had a quality that told me she had wanted a different apology and had recognized she was not going to get it. We talked for another few minutes about other things, and then said goodbye. We have spoken twice since then. Both conversations were surface level and fine. I came home 8 months after the auction. My posting had ended, and I had taken 2 weeks between the end of field work and the start of my campus position, and I drove up to the cabin at the beginning of the second week, alone, on a Friday afternoon. The road was in worse shape than I remembered. I had to take it slowly. The cabin itself was in reasonable condition. My Uncle Brett had kept it up during deer season, so the roof had been checked, and the windows were intact, and the wood stove worked. Someone had left a box of kitchen matches on the counter, and a jar of coffee on the shelf above the sink. I sat on the dock for a long time that afternoon. The lake was the same temperature it had always been. The rock formations on the far shore were the same. A merganser flew across the water at low altitude and landed somewhere beyond the point, and I watched it until it was gone. I had spoken with a property manager named Sandra Obi in the county seat, who handled short-term rental coordination for lake properties in the area, and she had given me an assessment of what the cabin could generate as a seasonal rental, approximately $23,400 annually at current rates, with occupancy rates she considered conservative. I had also spoken, briefly, with a local real estate agent named Greg Henshaw, who had given me a market valuation for the parcel, $287,000, which he said was likely to appreciate modestly over the next 5 years given the direction of the regional market. I had not made a decision. I had both numbers in a notebook, and I was going to let them sit for a while before I did anything. What I had decided, sitting on that dock, was that whatever I did with the property, I was going to do it in my own time, for my own reasons, without anyone else's timeline attached to it. That was not a dramatic conclusion. It was just the only one that made sense. My grandfather had given me that cabin because he had watched me pay attention for 25 years. He had watched me show up, summer after summer, and he had decided that the place deserved someone who would see it clearly and take care of it in the same spirit he had taken care of it. He had not given it to me to win anything. He had given it to me because he thought I would know what to do. I am still figuring out what to do. I think that is probably the right pace. The people in your life who assume you are not paying attention are counting on a version of you that stopped being accurate a long time ago. The distance they read as absence is sometimes just the view from a different angle. They forget that from 11 time zones away, a county recorder's file is one forwarded email. They forget that the work you did quietly, in all the years before they made their plans, does not disappear simply because they didn't watch you do it. My grandfather knew what he was doing when he picked up the phone and called me instead of calling a meeting. He had understood something about how certain things work, not the family things, the legal things, and he had acted on that understanding without ceremony. I did the same. We just did it from different distances. I go back to the cabin when I can. The keys are still on the hook by the door, the same hook my grandfather put there in 1987. I have not moved them. There's a specific moment from this that I've come back to more than once. The hour between the time I sent that email and the time the buyer's attorney called the station. I was making tea. I knew what the email would do, and I had to decide whether to say anything to anyone in the family before the process ran its course, or to let it run. I let it run. I'm curious whether you've ever been in that particular moment, where you know something is about to shift, and you have the choice to warn someone or to simply let what's already true come to light. What did you do? Subscribe if this one landed. New stories every week. This is an original fictional story created for entertainment and educational purposes only. All names, characters, events, and details are invented and do not represent real individuals or actual events.